Example 2 of 3 for task 4A, a contrast-focused analysis. In the arguments for this example, both have definite conclusions, the conclusions being identical to each other. One mistake that students make is if they copy the same sentence in the affirmative or the same sentence denying, or even the same sentence saying that it's not rational for them to take a definite position, and then they'll say that their conclusions are similar. If you copied exactly the same sentence, either in the affirmative or the denial or that it's not rational, then you have exactly the same conclusion. It's identical. So don't use the word similar if you have the same conclusion that you copied. So that applies if you followed the directions, of course. All right, so on to the examples, or the example for this item, which has 360 words for the analytical paragraph only. The performance is rated as outstanding, and the score is 92.5 to 97.5 points. Let's go ahead and take a look at the reasoning here and take note of how the structure of the reasoning of the paragraph, the discussion, the objective analysis falls in line with expectations from the document you downloaded. So of course, we have yet another example of how you can start a claim. One thing that is different about our arguments has to do with the fact that I make explicit how science plays or could play a role in proving that a claim about wearing mask is true, while you do not. Okay, so then they say, I use the word science twice, the first time being in the following claim about research and experience. So again, this is what I talked about with respect to the first contrast-focused example. I said it's okay to include some contextualizing information en route to introducing or getting to your evidence, your quoted text from an original argument. Just make sure you don't actually start discussing the similarity or difference. While there is contextual information here, it's being used in a very direct and explicit way to contextualize their introduction and hence their quoted material, introduction to and hence their quoted material. So of course that would be highlighted as with blue. Then they say, you never use the word science, but I'm wondering if maybe the role of science is implied at the end of the following statement from your argument. So this one also provides not only some what we might call some intellectual context, but also some, well, actually intellectual context in two ways. So the speaker or the reader is letting the reader or the peer know that they are wondering. They don't have any absolute proof about science being implied in their argument, but they're wondering. And it's okay to say things like that, especially when you're focusing on differences, because it's focusing on differences or on a contrast is a little bit more challenging. And so they provide a little bit of context. They also provide context from the argument in here at the same time. That is the peer's argument to help the reader appreciate the initial introduction of the evidence that they will be using. So of course, this is all going to be in light blue. So a tip that I have for you is that when you are done with your paragraph, you should highlight. So highlight step 3A in green, 3B in light blue. Make sure you use light or neon colors. Or pastel. I really love pastel green and pastel blue. That's the easiest to look at. Look at, how much of the highlighted, how much of what is highlighted compares to what is not highlighted. In other words, how much of your step 3C, what is the ratio of the step 3C interpretation, discussion, and argumentation about the arguments? What is the ratio of that to the blue and green stuff? You should have a lot more here that is not highlighted than is highlighted. And of course, I've talked about highlighting stuff and why and what not to highlight in other videos. Okay, so it could be that. So notice that, they start off with lots of hedging. And so in this one, I'm wondering, it could be that. Over here, they say, it seems. It's okay to use those terms. Now, if somebody explicitly says science is sometimes wrong, then you wouldn't say something like, it seems like you think that science is sometimes wrong. No, if they come out and say it, then there's no seeming. You could just say, it's obvious that you question science because you say science is sometimes wrong. Okay, so it could be that. So that's a great, nice little introductory clause that's adding cohesion. It's a nice segue from their quoted evidence to the discussion that they're now going to have about the evidence with a hedge. It could be that the published article you reference is a scientific one. It seems, there's another hedge, the fact that the method you are describing is one, it seems that the fact that the method that you are describing is one that a scientist might use to determine the truth about wearing masks. Okay, so there's a little typo. If this was you and you had this one little typo, I'm not taking off anything. I can only speculate that your reasoning includes, so I can only speculate, right? So I can speculate. I'm wondering, it could be that, it seems. Where are we? I can only speculate that your reasoning includes at least indirect attention to the role of science in supporting your claim in your first sentence, your conclusion. So again, another little typo too in a paragraph this long with this much depth, I'm not going to take off for that. Now, if there were like 5 or 6 instances where a letter's left off, I might take off half a point or a point or something like that. When it comes to my argument, however, look at that. This word, however, I lectured on the word however and transitional clauses and introductory clauses and whatnot. Here, however, is being used properly. I talked about earlier in a different video how however is often used incorrectly. Here it is being used correctly because they're making a point of contrast. They're talking about something that is dissimilar, and however can be used to do just that. So when it comes to my argument, and again, this is a nice transitional phrase, they're letting us know that they're now going to focus on their own argument, coherence, fluidity. I'm able to follow what they're up to from one sentence to the next, beginning at the very beginning of a given sentence. There is no need to speculate on, and here really, I should have no need to speculate on nor assume. Okay, so right there, that's 3 little minor errors. At this point, I might start to take off. Nor assume what role, if any, I think science has in reasoning. Like I already stated, I used the word science twice. Notice how up here they mentioned that they use the word science twice, but they still follow the requirement of presenting just one quoted statement. So they don't quote both statements here at the beginning. They just say the first time being in the following claim. So that's how you can do something like that, where you want to focus on a word that's used over and over and over again in somebody's reasoning. You could just, hey, you or I use this word, blah, blah, X, a lot of times. One time that it was used was here. And so you might want to think critically about which statement would you want to use. Maybe the first one would be the correct statement to use the first time they use that word. And then you can mention later on if you want to, if it makes sense, other instances where they used it, or what other claims or ideas in your reasoning or their reasoning did they associate the meaning of that word, and hence the concept in their reasoning too. All right, so so this is also a nice segue right here. It's actually a conclusion indicator. Then they have, when it comes to, so we already have that part. Like I already stated, so this is referring back to something they already said. They want to let us know that they're not adding new information. They're reminding us of something they already said. I use the word science twice, directly relating it to activities like experiments and research. So they are pulling these words from further on in their argument. So there's how you can do that, right? So in the original statement that they quoted, you don't see the word research and experiments, but later on in their argument, they do. So that's how you can pull from other parts of the argument to make your case about something. But of course, it needs to somehow be relevant to the quoted evidence and your ultimate claim in green. While your discussion, so again, good transition. Here they're letting us know that they are going to say something that is contrasting to something else that they have said. So they're going to contrast something in the discussion of their peer with respect to what they said or what they focused on, or whether they made something explicit. While your discussion of how we can prove a claim about mask wearing is true points to or suggests, and this should really be plural, you have an experiment and research in mind. You don't directly come out and name these scientific activities, much less mention science the way that I do. So I'm going to touch on something that I mentioned earlier, and that is when you're discussing a contrast, you might have to bring up similarities, but you only bring them up indirectly to make the case for a contrast. Vice versa. If you're doing a contrast-focused paragraph, a comparison-based focused paragraph, in arguing for the comparison, you might implicitly, directly, or indirectly bring up differences, but the point is to get to confirming or making a compelling case for how something is alike across your two arguments. So even if the published article you cite was not citing a scientific study, so here what they're doing is they are offering a discount. So even if the published article you cite was not citing a scientific study, so they're saying, I recognize an objection that my interpretation and my speculation could be wrong. Maybe you're not thinking of science at all. So that's what you call a discount. So they're raising an objection that their peer or somebody might raise with respect to what they're about to say, but they're going to go ahead and make their claim anyway. There is still the difference that I show explicitly how powerful a role science plays in my claim that we can prove the truth of any claims about wearing a mask. This needs a little bit more tidying up here. They could say something else about, just one more claim about, you still, they could put like and, comma, you never use the word science. You're never direct about that. So that still stands. All right, that's all I have for you in this example.